Hello, and welcome to Everyday Tarot, where I'm making tarot accessible and intuitive for everyone. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, your hallowed high priestess, tarot reader, and professional witch, and today I'm talking about the ethics of tarot. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every Monday to check out the latest episode. If you're enjoying Everyday Tarot and want to go deeper, I'd love to invite you to join the Everyday Tarot family on Patreon. You'll get exclusive tarot content like live access to New Moon Collective Tarot readings, get to meet other listeners in our members only chat, get access to bonus resources like my tarot card crafting workshop and tarot spreads I'm sharing, and a chance to help shape the future of the podcast. Your support helps keep the show free and accessible for everyone, and you can find the link in the show notes to check out the Patreon. If you can't commit monthly but really want to get a reading from me, perhaps, right now I'm actually offering pay what you can tarot readings for the next month. So I'll have the link to that as well. And that will get you a 30-minute virtual video reading with me. Afterwards, you'll get a full video or a full write-up of the cards, the themes we discussed, images of the cards I pulled during the reading, and the recording of the reading as well. So you can always refer back to it. And of course, if you don't have the funds or can't commit to longer term membership, you can always support me and the podcast for free by listening, leaving a review, and subscribing or following in your favorite podcast app. You can join my newsletter list where you get my Hallowed Tarot Spread workbook, the most up-to-date info on upcoming events, presentations, musings, and info and photos of my day-to-day life. You can fill out my guest inquiry form if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast. And as of last week, posted this week, I have actually made some merch for the podcast. So that's another way you can support. I'll have the link in the show notes as well. I'm using bonfire.com. And I created a bunch of shirts and sweatshirts. I have tank tops and crop tops with the Everyday Tarot logo on it, as well as the sort of that key phrase that I often go into, the deep dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot on there. And I would love to, this is kind of a trial. So doing some merch. I got some for myself. I got a purple tank top and a white crop top for summer. I have actually currently my only piece of merch, I guess, that I have for clothing. I made this one on Canva and got it printed last year. If you're watching the video, you can check it out. I have a blue t-shirt with the old logo from last year with the daily dive phrase on there, or mantra. And yeah, I got it so I could wear it to Tacoma Pride last year when I was tabling there and having fun. So yeah, if you'd like to get some merch, please check out the merch link. I would love for you to be sporting, your support for the podcast this summer ongoing, and maybe you'll have some people ask you about tarot or about the podcast, and you can start to find people near you that maybe are interested, tarot curious, all sorts of things. Yeah, and if folks like this, I'll be making more merch in the future as well, expanding beyond clothing. I also have Everyday Tarot stickers, so if you join any level on the Patreon, I will be mailing you a sticker as well on the paid tiers. So yeah, those are some of the ways you can get merch, which is super fun. And then again, you can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes, or you can always go over to Patreon on the free portion of Patreon and find the full kind of like blog postings for each episode with images of the cards, etc. All right, so let's get into the main discussion. So today I'm having kind of like a more free-form discussion, exploration of the ethics of tarot. I don't remember exactly what spurred this topic, but I was talking to my friend Izzy, and we were kind of talking about tarot stuff and ethics, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you should do an ethics of tarot episode." So I had it kind of in my queue to do, and then this morning I spent some time kind of like fleshing it out. What do I think about the ethics of tarot? What feels important to discuss? So I kind of going to be approaching it from these like four different aspects. I'm going to be talking about kind of the ethics of tarot as a teacher or educator, or, someone that likes to talk about tarot and like talk about how I do it. I'm going to be talking about the ethics of tarot as someone that reads for themselves. I'm going to be talking about the ethics of tarot as someone in like spiritual or witchy community or paganism and the occult. And then also kind of to fully wrap it up, I'll talk about ethics of tarot as a reader and how I experience that as a tarot reader. So let's get into it. So I kind of wanted to start with the like teacher, podcast host, person that loves to like present about tarot and talk about it, lead meetups, do the podcast, etc. Because this is kind of my foundation around the ethics of tarot. I believe that tarot should be accessible to everyone. That's part of my personal belief. I think it's important to move away from some of the like perhaps historical gatekeeping that has gone on in tarot community, where there are kind of, I would say, a lot of myths about tarot or how it gets practiced, or just some like rules. And again, I'll kind of like talk about this in a more nuanced way later on and kind of get into the like pros and cons of accessibility when it comes to tarot. But as a teacher, I think it's really important. I don't think anyone needs to have a background in tarot, have someone in their family that's into tarot, the occult, or is psychic in order to like experience wonder and divinity and wisdom and reflection, like in the tarot. So I think also, so that's certainly in there. And that's like part of why I do this podcast, part of what I loved about doing like in-person meetups to talk about tarot, doing my tarot card crafting, where I kind of, right, we're approaching sort of the artistic side of tarot, which I also very much approach from a like, you can do it too. Here's how to collage tarot. Here's the materials. Here's my method. Here's how I think you can go out and do that. So if you want to experience that, the crafting side of it as well, I do have my tarot card crafting workshop available. You can either get it if you're a part of the Patreon tiers, as one of the many kind of like bonuses that come along with that, or you can just like buy it full out. It's like a 1 hour workshop that I did last summer and recorded. I have like a 20-page, 25-page guidebook where I go through my methodology, like why I think it's important, what to know about tarot, how to approach it artistically, even if you feel like you don't have any art skills, um, and how to kind of that creativity and crafting tarot also like helps you engage with it in a different capacity than the perhaps seen as more passive side of like pulling tarot cards or experiencing tarot from a reader or like a querent, so the person asking the questions of the tarot perspective. Um, so if you want to grab that and like want to deep dive into this other aspect of accessibility, I think when it comes to tarot, you can always go to my link tree on Instagram, where I'm at professional.witch. And I have like most of my offers in there, video podcast, the workshops, the merch link, anything like that. And I do try to keep it up to date. Okay. So what else as a teacher do I think about the ethics of tarot? I do think another part of it, like how I do it on the podcast, is so sort of being like transparent about how you do tarot. I wrote down like open about my own experiences, but I do feel like this is like sharing your own experience with the tarot. I love when guests come on the podcast to ask them, like, where did you get your first deck? Like, how did you first come up like around tarot? Did you get it as a teenager? Did you pick it up recently? Did you feel like called to it in a store? Do you have familial like tradition of tarot? All different things, and people have different experiences, but I think that that's like a fun part of doing it. And I think as someone that's like, in another part of my life, trained as a therapist, we talk about that in therapy school, I guess, a lot, which is like how transparent or like how open about your own experiences are you with clients, and kind of the different approaches to that, and some of the like pros and cons to that, or like how do you decide when it's appropriate to share something about yourself. And again, in therapy world, there's a lot, at least in my like graduate school program, we talked a lot about how do you know when to share things about yourself personally. And a lot of it has to do with like, is it being led by the client? Do you think it would be something that's going to like help the client in some way? Or are you doing this from a place of like something that feels a bit more self-serving? And obviously, there's a lot of like rules and boundaries inherent in the ethics of the therapy profession. So it's something I've like thought a lot about. So I try to I tried to keep that in mind as I was approaching this discussion of ethics of tarot as well, like how much of my ethics around it, like, yeah, where are they informed from? So part of it is like accessibility, part of it is like moving away from gatekeeping, like I said, and kind of my personal belief that like I think tarot is for everyone, and I would love like everyone to be using tarot. I would love for everyone to have access to therapy, to benefit from therapy. That doesn't mean you need to be in it all the time, but I wish everyone could have access to it, whether that be financial or time-wise, or to have a therapist that really like works for them. I think kind of my last point around the like ethics of tarot, when I think about myself as like a teacher a bit more, is like that sharing something that you love, to me, is always more convincing than telling someone that they should do something. Right. So again, it's like if I like part of why I love to do the podcast, or why I love to have guests on, or why I like to read tarot for myself and others, is that like I love it. I love that way of connecting. I love being able to kind of tune into my intuition that way, to get like what I see as downloads from the universe in that way. And that's why I want to talk about it. Like, and I know sometimes that might come across as like a bit evangelical about it, like, oh, you should hear the good word about tarot. But I don't actually need everyone to do tarot. I want everyone to have the option, I guess, is kind of where I'm at. And just that, like, I like to share about it because it's something that I love and that has helped me and helped, like, yeah, again, me, like, be more in tune with my intuition. It's a way to do that, to get and kind of be in what I see as like communication with the divine, with the tarot as like the medium in between. Some people do this with religious texts, things like that. I feel that way about tarot, I think. And so that's like why I love to share about it, instead of saying like, oh, everyone should do tarot because of this, or it's going to call you out, or it's going to like teach you boundaries, which like, I might think some of those things are helpful. But again, sort of, I think about it sometimes in the same way that I do as a therapist, where I'm like, yeah, but people might not be ready to hear that right now, right? Or, and so people may come around to it, and I want, again, them to kind of know that it's available to you, that it's available to everyone in my belief system. And that's part of why I do what I do. So let's get into more of as someone that reads for yourself. Again, maybe you don't resonate with you're like, cool, great. So happy for you, Camille, that you have a podcast and like to teach about tarot, but that's not what I want to do, right? Like I want to just learn how to read tarot for myself, or, yeah, like connect with it. So I think that as someone, again, like when I think about myself as a person that reads tarot for myself, which I certainly do. Not all of my tarot is on the podcast, although a lot of it is. But yeah, I think it's important to me that part of it is having some level of like community or learning from others, whether that's like books, a podcast, friends, mentors, like learning from other people that do tarot and interact with it, have written about it. Like I said, I think that's like important. And just as important is to find like your own way of doing it and what works for you. And I think again that like that's where my sort of ethics come in of like you can do what works for you, and finding what works for you is part of like the fun. And to me again kind of like the ethics of it is like there's a lot of different methods or decks or right types of cards. There's tarot, there's oracle, there's even other types of divination, and like trying things out to see what you like, right? There's so many decks out there, not even just of tarot, but also oracle and affirmation decks and all different kinds of things. So like, I think trying different things out and seeing what resonates, or even like what resonates right now at this time in your life is, I would say, part of your like your due diligence as someone that's reading for yourself. And again, that could start with like one deck and one book or one podcast, right? It can start small. But I do think that like while you can read for yourself and perhaps never read for anyone else, or even like never, like produce content about it or anything like that, like it could just be this personal practice for you. I still think that with a lot of practices, my approach is still from this like more spiritual side of it where I'm like, yeah, but you should have some community around that, or you should have someone you can talk to about it, or, even if that's just like authors and books, like to find your own, to see how other people do it and then kind of find what's right for yourself. I think that that's also like important to do. Because at least for me, getting to see the same card across different decks, the same decks read by different tarot readers. And yeah, and that's like a big part of it too. It's like part of what I personally love about tarot or find interesting or helpful about it is that not everyone does it the same way, or there's different traditions of tarot and experiences. And again, even if we like expand outside of tarot to like divination in general, there's runes, there's cards, there's bones, there's water, there's scrying, which is like looking in like a mirror or a crystal ball. Like there's all these different ways of in tea reading, palm reading. There's all these different ways of kind of like divining the future, perhaps, or the possibilities, or um, symbols as they come up, and then interpreting those. But I think to me, again, the fun of it is kind of knowing the breadth of options and then getting to find like what works for me right now. And then kind of like on the other side of this, or I guess this is also related, but it kind of feels like a slightly different topic, but there are also a lot of what I would say like culturally appropriative decks that if you aren't part of that cultural tradition or haven't been inducted or mentored into it, you should not be using. And again, this is like coming from a like rules perspective. So I know that doesn't always feel good, but like, for example, and I'll kind of like get more into this as we move into the spiritual, witchy, pagan, occult community aspect of like reading tarot. But in this one still, and the right, a thing that you can do for yourself when you look at decks is like not buying decks that have what I would say is like appropriation from Native American culture, or that participate or try to teach closed practices, which are basically like religions or spiritual communities, or again, like practices that are traditionally or like now seen as things that you are only kind of like allowed to do if you have been mentored by someone else in that community or are part of like a genetic heritage or family system, or again like community, where you get taught all of those like traditions and you know how to like respect them. So again, things I think of are like Native American community, and part of this in particular with tarot is also like Romani people, which historically were like called a slur of gypsy. I don't think it's appropriate to use that word anymore because it is like a slur. So the Romani people, and I was going to read a bit about that and how it relates to tarot from my book, The Sacred Tarot Unveiled by Allison Walsh. And I'll have some more references in the show notes about like the history of tarot and the Romani people and how it gets like treated in like witchy pagan tarot community. Um, but yeah, in here they speak about that like the Romani people originally came from India. They migrated upwards and west to around like the Germany area or into a lot of like Slavic countries. This book is a bit old. Let's see. Yeah, 1994. So even some of the terminology in here, like they put it in quotes, but they use the word gypsy. And I would say in this day and age, like we don't use that word. Okay, they came from India. They migrated towards like Germany area into like considered the Slavic countries. It says their belief was in the great mother of the world, worshipped in India as the goddess of 100 names. So Kali, Shakti, Lakshmi, Ma, Mata, Sara, Tara. A divinatory reader amongst the Slavs was called a Vedavika, a truth-sayer or one who reads the Vedas, which were the sacred books of ancient, orally transmitted stories of India now written. And many of the people themselves were tortured and burned at the stake, along with other members in that community, and very many like women that weren't even part of those communities for being witches, or were killed for being familiars with the devil and demons, like in the Red Crusades time. Um, it says, truly the Middle Ages was a time of madness, which the Catholic Church created with its war on heresy by its institution of the Inquisition. More people in history were killed and terrorized by this greatest of persecutions, exceeding 5 centuries of violence, greater than the Holocaust of Germany. So this is another like aspect of, I think, in particular tarot, because I would say as someone who like was born in the 1990s, yeah, the word gypsy was used. It's often still seen as like a Halloween costume. There are tarot readers that I would say are not part of that cultural tradition of the Romani, but still use a lot of the like cultural pieces. Like for example, like headscarf things, or the sort of like coins around like the waist, or dress pieces like you might see in like belly dancing communities, or there are aspects of that culture that get kind of, again, made into a Halloween costume in the same way that I would say, like, at least in America, like in the United States, Native American community does as well. And so those are, yeah. So I guess with all that to say, like, if you are, again, like buying decks, and this is also a part of a larger practice in like the pagan community, not just with tarot, but like with other aspects of the occult or paganism, or like, for example, not buying white sage from witchy shops because often it's not harvested sustainably, and just like other, again, sort of like closed practices, like consuming some plant medicine. Those are protected for people of that community. And if sort of everyone goes out and harvests white sage, or for example, like peyote is another one that is like protected. It means that people of that cultural tradition are losing a lot of that, like of their cultural pieces, or like as those that actually steward the plants, the medicine, the aspects of it, when we're just kind of like selling it to the masses in stores, it often depletes what's available for people who have stewarded this plant or land or community for hundreds, if not thousands of years, because we like saw it in a book once. So these are some of the things that I'm talking about. So another one is kind of like hoodoo or voodoo culture, which is part of, um, I guess I'm saying this as like another closed practice, meaning that unless you are, so like the rituals and the religious communities are like restricted to those who've been formally like initiated or belong to the lineage. And like Haitian voodoo or like Louisiana voodoo is like a religion and seen as a closed practice. So saying again that like, um, unless you have been taught that and it's in your lineage, you've worked with mentors and the traditions, that you should not really be participating in those things. So again, that's something to like look out for when you are buying decks. Like, is there Native American art or symbolism in the deck, but it's not created by someone that's part of that community? Um, yeah, for example. I don't want to get like too hung up on this topic because it can be a lot of things. But again, so as we open it up to someone, to like the ethics of someone in the spiritual or witchy community, even if you don't necessarily like identify that way, like tarot has historically been seen as part of like a spiritual tradition or community, we have to acknowledge the history of like witches and psychics and tarot readers, midwives, um, plant medicine people, and all of the persecution that came along with that, right? That people literally died to carry on these practices and often died for their practicing this or even being accused of doing so, even if they didn't themselves. And so that's also important to remember. And what sort of made me think about this aspect of it is so I had this like topic. I've had it on the schedule for probably like a month and a half or 2 months now. Just when I had like an availability for an open topic, I wanted to talk about this. And then just this morning, I like saw a YouTube short that I was like, oh yeah, they're talking about this. So this is from Shameless Psychic Jackie. It's a YouTube short. I follow her channel, so I like see a lot of different things. But this morning she was talking about tarot and astrology readers or practitioners and kind of the ethics around it. And she was sharing about that sometimes there are people that have really like low cost services or things, tarot readings. And she was sort of speaking about like sometimes you get what you pay for when it comes to readers and psychics. And again, that we have to sort of acknowledge the large history around people that were persecuted and died to carry on these practices. I mean, people still are persecuted, but that is part of the history, whether that has like personally happened to you or not. And that sometimes when we discount or like have low fees for things, like sure, that can be accessible, which I think is good and helpful, and that sometimes it brings the view of the practice down along with that monetary level. And I guess again, like I have heard this talked about in therapy world of saying that like, yes, we want therapy to be accessible. Yes, I want people to be able to afford it. And as someone who, right, like went and got a master's degree for 2.5 years, and then also like finally I started grad school in 2019. It is now June 2026, and I have applied for my full licensure. So it's been 6, 7 years since beginning like that journey where I'm gonna finally be like quote unquote done. I've like finished all of the schooling and hours and everything that goes along with it. That again, if like we as a therapy industry, if some of us have low fees for or low costs for therapy, that can bring down the average pay of everyone around you, or even just how people view or value therapy. Um, which is like a whole other ethical topic. But I think there's something about this that feels similar here that sometimes if we, and even I could think this could be seen with kind of like the accessibility of tarot. Like to me, it's important that um, people do have access to it, to learn about it, that you don't need a ton of money to like do a course or things like that if you don't have that available to you at this time, and that people that have studied for years or, long traditions or are psychics or tarot readers and like channel a lot of energy. And again, like I'll get into this for the last part where we talk about being a reader. Like it's a lot of effort and energy put forth. And so there needs to be some kind of energetic exchange to do that. Now, whether that's again like financial or more of like bartering or trading services or that yeah, sometimes you do it for low cost or for free, but that also we want people to like respect this tradition and practice because it is like a spiritual practice and community, and sometimes people don't necessarily practice it that way or talk about it that way. And that, yeah, to go into that, I guess it's like, I don't want to prescribe for other people. Everyone's different. How one person reads can be very different from another, or even why they do so. And kind of as someone that's like also being certified as a sex therapist, there's like a phrase in that, especially around like kink things, where it says, don't yuck someone else's yum, right? Like, don't tell someone that they shouldn't like certain things just because you don't like it or you don't understand the appeal. That phrase in particular comes along with like a kink community. But yeah, I think it feels similar in this, where it's like just because someone else does tarot reading differently than you, I think it's always interesting to like learn the how and the why and like why they feel that or why it's important to them, and to not necessarily be judgmental of that. So, for the final part, let's talk about again, like as a tarot reader, as someone that, like, I feel like when I do the podcast or pull cards on the podcast, you know, you probably know this, but I like to do collective tarot readings, which means like I don't necessarily have a specific person in mind when I do readings on the podcast. Like, certainly, I think about how it applies to my own life, and, hopefully folks that listen, like you all get to, there's some things that click about, oh, maybe that's like applies to me right now. Um, but I think I do often experience it as channeling, which is sort of like yeah, you're in a certain state when you do that. And again, like I think there needs to be like boundaries around that for myself and others, or clear terms of engagement when it comes to being a tarot reader, right? Which again, some of that can be like, it's going to be this much time and this much money, and like making sure the energy exchange, like including money, feels fair and balanced. And if it doesn't, change it up, right? Whether that's as a reader or as a client, like if you don't feel like you're like getting your money's worth, like maybe that person's not the right one for you, and finding someone else that it does feel that way. Um, I think like, again, like, yeah, having clear terms of engagement, which I just mean like, you know what you're getting. So again, like when I do tarot readings for folks, it's like, okay, we have a certain amount of time. We're gonna record it on video for now, and then you'll get the recording later. So if you want to process it later or go back to it, you can. I'm gonna write stuff down so that you can see it, right? This is part of like the accessibility of it too. I think I still bring that to my readings, which is like, yeah, if you're a visual person, if you're an audio person, it's easier for you to like see it written out, like verbal instructions, and then also to see the cards themselves, because that to me is so much of tarot, right? It's why it's important to me on the podcast to like always have the images of the cards available to you all, even if you don't have the deck, because I think that that's like such a large part of how we interpret tarot. And then, yeah, I'm going to go into some examples as to like why I put these specific things in here to just like give a better idea. But I think the last one, or yeah, I guess two. So is like as a tarot reader, like sharing with compassion and honesty. Like I said earlier, like I have had experiences where um I might feel like I got like what again I interpret as like a download from the universe, like oh, this person needs to know this, but with like slightly softer language, or like I think it's important to share honestly like what you do learn or channel as like a reader, what you see in the cards or what comes to mind, like honestly. And just like with other types of honesty, that doesn't mean everyone always wants like brutal honesty, or doesn't want some level of like kind of like emotional filtering when it comes to sharing that information. And then I think the last thing is a tarot reader, which like I think is more like seen in pop culture about tarot readings, where it's kind of hard for me to be like, does anyone actually do this? Or is this just like what people who maybe don't necessarily know tarot or want to use that as a plot device in a movie, a book, a show, music, like think about it. But to me, it's kind of like, don't use it for dramatic effect. Like honor what the client sees in the card as well and use that to inform the reading. But also like in so many movies and shows, they pull like what are seen as like the worst cards, like death, the tower, the three of hearts, which is kind of like the heartbreak card. And it's very much like, oh no, like your life's gonna suck, like this, you're gonna literally die. Or where to me, I'm like, well, most people I know that read those cards, or like read for people in general, don't take the cards literally usually. Like again, usually the death card is not about like literally you're gonna die. Maybe like some part of you dies, or there's something you're releasing, or there's something dying and being reborn, but it's more like symbolic or metaphorical. And so I do, again, like as a reader, I think part of like sort of my own ethical code would be that like you don't make someone like fear mongering. Like you don't like scare someone in a situation because they pulled certain cards. So yeah, examples that I said I was going to give are like, yeah, fear mongering in pop culture and by readers. I think it's important to like honor the traditions of tarot and also adapt some of the cards or context to like our modern understanding of the cards, or a lot of tarot decks that I see in stores are like pretty modern, like made perhaps in the last like 5 to 10 years. And tarot is a like hundreds of year old tradition. So it's also, yeah, it's important to kind of like know the history, like I talked about with kind of like Romani people and sort of this cultural aspect of like that type of tarot reading, and that they weren't the only ones reading tarot that way, but a lot of how tarot gets depicted again in pop culture is this very like fear mongering, like, oh, this person's gonna like see the date you're gonna die, and they have like, they're like communing with the devil, just kind of all this like stuff that gets wrapped up in it of like the people who again like have these abilities or like have practice in this tradition um are seen as like evil. That's a lot of, and I think now when people sometimes come to tarot or come from a religious background and are trying to maybe open themselves up to other aspects of spirituality or tarot or other things, like that is part of like the barrier to entry, is that a lot of times people have been taught that tarot is devilish or it's not okay or it's, yeah. And again, a lot of that comes from the history of tarot, of fear of witchcraft or medicinal practitioners or people that could talk to spirits or get, again, like divine aspects of the future. There's a lot of fear around that, and that it's not something that's easily controlled by dominant religions like Catholicism, especially historically. Um, what else? I have had experiences, and I've like shared this maybe on the podcast before, sometimes when I talk to guests, but I have asked people what they would do. But I have like been in a like a room setting where I'm reading for someone. They're in front of me, right? They consented to a reading, like they're excited. And then there's like other people around in the room, or like we're in a setting that's more of like a market, or where there's like people passing by. And sometimes I have felt like, oh, and I pull a card, this is not for the person that's like sitting in front of me. It's for like someone else whose like energy is getting picked up on. And I know for me, like that feels like a bit of a dilemma, because like that person did not consent to a reading necessarily. I don't necessarily know how they feel about tarot, or if they would like want to hear this or not. Um, and again, like it can depend on their context. Like if that was someone I knew, or if it was like in a home setting, I could like ask them, I think this card was about you. Like, do you want me to like share that with you? But I definitely have been in settings where I've been like, I don't necessarily feel like I'm gonna do that. Where it's more like people are just walking by that I've never met before, things like that. So I do feel like this is a sort of like an ethical dilemma I have come up against, and I just sometimes I'll ask other readers about it because I'm like curious. Because I think again, like when I think sometimes about the parallels to being a therapist, like as a therapist, sometimes there are times where I'm like, oh, I feel like I know what's going on. But again, I'm like, I don't really know if you're ready to hear that, or if I do share it with you, like you very well might blow up and never come back again. And people have different kind of opinions. And I think like with longer experiences being a therapist, people generally like become a bit more like transparent, or like, I guess, get to the point quicker sometimes, as a therapist, because it just feels like, oh, well, let's not like waste time. Oh, like trying to do something that just like makes the client comfortable, or that we're going to pretend like this thing's not going on, right? That can also, in my opinion, like not be super ethical therapy. So I guess I think about that as like a tarot reader, where it's like, yeah, I want to share things that I feel like honestly are about other people, and like I don't necessarily know how those people are going to react or how they're going to feel about it. And I prefer to, if I'm going to be pulling cards for someone, that, they have consented to the process. Um, so yeah, I talked about kind of the fear mongering in pop culture. I think also about like when doing tarot, like in ritual or community, or I've done it as a therapist in like client sessions with people, not necessarily like reading for someone, but like utilizing tarot as symbolism or a means by which to have a larger discussion. Or even when I like do tarot with friends, like I treat it as like you are communing with the deck, and that you should treat it as such, that like it's its own energetic thing. It's like in the same way that I might treat a plant or wild animals, where they have their own energetic, I was going to say like symbolism or like aspect to them. And this is why like sometimes you'll hear about like, oh, how do you like get to know a deck? Like you can like interview your deck by pulling cards and like asking questions, or you like physically take it around with you, or like put it under your pillow or bring it in your purse everywhere as a means to like commune with the deck. That I do think tarot historically was built as a way to commune, again, like not in isolation, but seen in community. And so like, while again, I think if you just want to read for yourself or you want to use tarot for yourself, like, I'm not going to say that you need to like read for other people because you have to learn what that's like. But I know for myself, like when I did read for other people, even when it was friends or casually, or I would post a spread of cards I pulled on an Instagram story and I would say nothing about it, like there's still a level of like community along with that, because other people are seeing it and interacting with it, or other people are coming to talk to me about it and saying, oh, would you do a reading for me? That I do think like acknowledging that, like most rituals or like spiritual or religious, again, like holidays or rituals, like they are often meant to be done in community, and we should treat it as such. Um, yeah, and then I guess the last one I kind of already talked about already, but just this idea that, like, as a reader, perhaps, or as someone like teaching about tarot, I need to make sure that, like, lowering the fee for tarot might undermine other readers and the value of it. Again, not that I think that like we should make tarot inaccessible to people, but I also want to say that, again, like with therapy, I'm like, I think almost all therapists should get paid more than they are per hour. And I recognize that like even the current cost of therapy, or the current cost that, or what therapists get paid from insurance, like is still inaccessible to a lot of people. And so it's a balance. I guess we can hold both things at once, both ideas at once, that we don't want to undermine like the profession, the practice, the amount of like energy it may take, or the, yeah, the the skill and like talent and practice it may have taken for people to get to the point where they are, to be a reader, to offer it at a certain price or teach it at a certain price. Um, yeah, and then again, like I feel like we can hold both those ideas at once. So yeah, I'll have, like I said, I'll put the YouTube short that I saw with Shameless Psychic Jackie on in the notes. I have a couple different articles and like a Reddit post that I was reading about with like the history of tarot and Romani people, and that I kind of used to form like my discussion about it. I will link the workshop for my tarot crafting like workshop in case you want to check that out. And then, yeah, let's go ahead and pull a card before we wrap up today. So, yeah, is there anything else we need to know on the ethics of tarot that need to be shared or that we need to keep in mind as we move forward with this topic or in engaging with the tarot? I'm pulling from my Snag tarot deck. Ooh, I pulled the Tower. Okay, so change is coming. That's what I would say. I'll share my screen so you can see this beautiful Tower card. Share, window. All right, so here's our Tower card. Like I said, very beautiful. So this is the Snag tarot deck. This is the guide. So here's our card here. So yeah, the traditional meaning of the Tower in tarot is generally like upheaval, sudden change, collapse of structures, especially like kind of false ones or like an illusion of structure, and also revelation, right? The things that come with when we start to see clearly. The Tower represents a breaking point when something built on unstable foundations collapses. So this deck says their take on the Tower is it signals disruption but not without purpose. It can point to the collapse of systems, beliefs, or situations that were never sustainable or just. While this can feel chaotic, it also creates space for rebuilding in a way that is more honest and equitable. This card asks you to consider what is falling away and whether it needed to. So, very interesting when we think about this in the context of ethics of tarot, right? Perhaps something in our larger world is collapsing, and tarot is our, perhaps the space where we can rebuild the world we want to have, the world that we can imagine and create that is more honest and equitable. Like, that sounds great. I would like that world. Right? There's something falling away. And again, perhaps maybe for you, that's the idea that, right, the tarot is like the devil or evil. Like perhaps it's this idea of, oh yeah, that's something that other people do, not something I can do, or I don't have the skills or talent to do that. Right? There's something, I think this is sort of like a larger conversation about like tarot also signals disruption, like, but perhaps like there's a purpose of doing so. Like maybe some of our old systems or beliefs or ways that we used to think or practice in the world, right, were exploitative or not sustainable. And then, right, obviously the tower crumbles. It often gets struck by lightning. It's on fire and we have to kind of escape it. But also that like burning down can create space for rebuilding something new. So again, to me, this is very like, what is the world that we're rebuilding? What's the world that we want to have and want to create out there? Because destroying it, as long as we do it all together, it can be easy, but rebuilding something that does still have structure and boundaries and, right, like inherent space of inside and outside, like, even if that is more equitable, it still requires some level of like planning and structure. So if we allow, right, if we do the work to collapse the system or beliefs, the tower itself, then we also have to do the work of creating something new. Which again doesn't have to happen in the tower, but right, that's why the star comes after the hope, the renewal, the guidance, where it sort of helps to lead us of where we need to go next. So yeah, okay, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see you before we end. So yeah, I pulled the tower today from the Snag tarot deck, and this is our collective reading for the week. I am going to be heading over to Patreon right now to draw a clarifying card specifically for maybe some of the blockages around, oh man, like, right, I'm scared about what the tower means in my life, or we'll pull another card to see if there's any other kind of information or other things we need to know, or how to actually, right, build something new and how to overcome them this week. If you want to see that exact card, what it means for your energy, you can click the Patreon link below and join us for the rest of the reading. And I'll be doing those after every episode going forward. I kind of just like stop this recording, say goodbye. I head into the next one, and last time it was 10 minutes. So where I pull another card and kind of see, yeah, what else we might need to know, or how do we actually deal with that. So you will get weekly episodes, usually published Mondays, guest episodes about once a month. Every episode is recorded on video as of 2026, and you can always check those out on Spotify and YouTube and other platforms coming soon. Otherwise, the audio is kind of everywhere you get your podcasts. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, you can fill out my form to be a guest. Links for the decks I talk about will always be in the show notes and on Patreon if you want to look at them, or like check out the cards I pulled. Go ahead and check out the merch link at bonfire.com. Get your merch, match me in your purple tank or your white crop top or whatever you want to wear this summer. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Tune in every Monday to check out the latest episode. You can always email me, e@CamilleASaunders.com, with your thoughts, questions, and more, or you can comment or review, the episode wherever you find your podcast. All right, see you soon. Bye bye.